Looks like we're shy of one horse.
You brought two too many.
Guys, welcome to a classic film review of 1968's Once Upon a Time in the West, directed by Sergio Leone and starring Charles Bronson, Peter Fonda, Claudia Cardinale and Jason Robards, among many others. And it's the story of a mysterious stranger with a harmonica on a revenge mission who joins forces with a desperado in an attempt to stop a railroad tycoon and his hired assassin from stealing land off the beautiful woman they've made a widow. Now, I'm going to level with you up front because for me, this is the single greatest Western ever made. When I was younger, I had a widescreen VHS copy of it, and it was a blind buy after I'd watched Leone's Man with No Name trilogy, or the Dollars trilogy on late night TV, and it immediately blew me away. The cast, the scenery, the music, the characters, Claudia Cardinale. It's a kind of greatest hits compilation of everything the Western genre had achieved. Let's take a look. So Once Upon a Time in the West is Sergio Leone's full stop at the end of a sentence that began with A Fistful of Dollars in 1964 and ended with The Good, the Bad and the Ugly in 1966. The Italian director teamed up with filmmakers Dario Argento and Bernardo Bertolucci and put together a story about a corrupt railroad businessman using hired goons to murder his way onto valuable land. Now, one hired goon is super assassin Frank, played by cast against type Henry Fonda, and the land they've recently tried to steal is now owned by Jill McBain, played by Claudia Cardinale, and they've tried to pin the massacre on local bandit Cheyenne, played by Jason Robards. Now, things get spicy when another three goons are sent to the train station to off Claudia Cardinale, but instead bump into the mysterious harmonica-playing stranger who's just arriving in town. Now, over the course of the next 2 hours and 45 minutes, all these characters will intersect in a twisty opera of violence. Now, I did read somewhere that this was Sergio Leone telling a 40-minute story in 160 minutes, which of course is nonsense because what Leone and his eventual co-writer Sergio Donati want to do here isn't a straightforward revenge film or a straightforward nasty businessman land grab movie, but a Western epic, one that highlights the attempts to build the Western frontier into a civilised society. Now, the film laments the ending of an era of lawless cowboys and introduces capitalist money grabbers as the real villains of the West, and also shows us frontier towns slowly becoming proper towns linked by rail. Now, the real reason that Gabriele Ferzetti's corrupt businessman Morton wants the McBain's barren-looking Sweetwater ranch is because it has water and is ideally situated to house a railroad town. Now, the film famously opens with an almost 10-minute opening sequence with no dialogue as three baddies played by Western regulars Jack Elam, Woody Strode and Al Mullock wait for the train to arrive at the old west town of Flagstone. Now, Leone making the mundane act of just hanging around a station a miniature epic of tension and visual comedy. And after all that agonising waiting, now, Charles Bronson, who was fresh off the previous year's Dirty Dozen, of course, is great as the almost silent harmonica, letting the little instrument do most of the talking for him. And he's perfectly paired with Jason Robards, who's the much more talkative anti-hero Cheyenne, the outlaw being framed for the McBain massacre. Now, the pair basically have their own little buddy cop movie within this movie. Cheyenne looking to clear his name and harmonica looking for Fonda's villain for reasons that only the finale will make clear. And the pair have some great dialogue throughout.
The reward for this man is $5,000, that's right?
Judas was content with $4,970 less.
There were no dollars in them days.
But sons of bitches, yeah.
And the other interesting pairing in the film is Peter Fonda's blue-eyed killer Frank and Gabriele Ferzetti's businessman Mr Morton. Morton suffers from a crippling tuberculosis and therefore needs Frank to do his bidding. And of course, in the middle of all these morally questionable men is the real star of the film, Claudia Cardinale, who arrives in Utah to find her new husband and family wiped out, but instead of getting back on the train decides to fight for her land. Now, Cardinale was already a star in Europe and had already appeared in the Pink Panther films in the early 60s, but Sergio Leone knew he had possibly one of the hottest women in world cinema at his disposal and makes sure he uses her accordingly. Cardinale is astonishing here, of course. Her initial entrance into Flagstone as Ennio Morricone's music soars is iconic. Now, of course, this being a Sergio Leone movie, it looks stunning. Leone shot the film at the famous Cinecittà Studios in Rome, as well as on location in Monument Valley in Utah and the Tabernas Desert in Spain. Of course, in his Dollars trilogy, Leone had slowly broadened his landscapes, and here the horizon's the limit, with huge tracking shots and hundreds of extras splashed across the widest screen. Now, Sergio Leone and the word operatic are usually bundled together, and to be fair, that's how he shoots his scenes. Soaring music, characters framed against huge landscapes, or the camera pushed so far into the face of a character that their eyes fill the screen. So Once Upon a Time in the West takes its time for sure. Leone's films began as 100-minute rapid-fire bullet fests and quickly expanded in runtime as his ambition and storytelling confidence grew. His 1984 epic crime film Once Upon a Time in America clocks in at over 4 hours in its restored cut. Now, here he gives each of his characters space to do their thing. Even Fonda's villain rises above nasty of the week as he's shown to have ambitions to try and become more of a respectable businessman. Tries, at least.
So you found out you're not a businessman after all.
Just a man.
An ancient race.
Jason Robards' bandit, Cheyenne, after a life of robbing and killing, is looking to maybe save a little bit of his soul by doing a good deed. And Claudia Cardinale's Jill is a former prostitute turning over a new leaf and becoming legitimate. And that's the main theme of the movie, the West moving from dirty and immoral to modern and civilised, even if the means to get there are dirty and immoral. Now, I suppose across the cast, the most straightforward storyline is Charles Bronson's Harmonica, who is essentially out for revenge in true Western style, but his mission here isn't about land or money, but something more personal. No spoilers, but there's these brilliant fever dream style flashback sequences throughout the film, again soundtracked by those famous harmonica notes that slowly reveal a pivotal plot point. Now, upon completion, the studio, Paramount, were blissfully unaware that they'd been given a masterpiece and decided to cut half an hour of key scenes out of it in an attempt to sell more popcorn, and watched it bomb on its initial release, and that's been rectified, thankfully. So Once Upon a Time in the West came at the tail end of the 1960s, which was also, in a way, the tail end of the Western genre's popularity for a time, certainly compared to its dominance a decade or two earlier. Now, Leone took everything he knew about Westerns, the genre's archetypes he grew up with, the whore with the heart, the gunslinger out for revenge, the evil railroad company, and cinema itself, and fused it all into one grand elegy to the last days of the West. Now, he hoped its success would grease the wheels in getting his dream project, the epic American crime drama Once Upon a Time in America, made. Sadly, however, it would be another decade and a half before that project came to fruition, and even that film was subject to studio butchery. Anyway, Once Upon a Time in the West is now widely and rightly regarded to be Leone's Western magnum opus, although many do prefer the more accessible thrills of his Good, the Bad and the Ugly. Now, that film is one of the great Westerns, but this is one of the great films. Go check it out.
I could swear we're going to have that strange sound.
Right now.